Greetings, and thank you for joining us today for Hope NCCU's Collegiate Recovery Monthly Livestream, where we focus on different behavioral and process addictions and positive coping strategies to avoid these issues. This month, we would like to focus on providing NCCU students with information and advice on a community resource that can give us a fantastic insight into mental health from a professional viewpoint and what the organization does for those in the community. My name is Demia Millhouse, and I'm a graduate assistant of the Collegiate Recovery Community here at North Carolina Central. And I would also like to introduce our newest NCCU Collegiate Recovery graduate assistant, Micaiah Brown. How are you, Micaiah?
I am doing extremely well. Excited to be here. Excited to meet everyone. Hello.
Hey.
Thank you. And now, without further ado, we would like to introduce our this month's special guest, Victoria Cooper of UNC Collegiate Recovery Community. All right.
Hey.
Okay, let's go ahead and get started. Can you tell us who you are and what your position is?
Yeah, so I go by Vic mostly, Vic or Victoria. My last name now is Menz. I just changed it. But I am the recovery programs coordinator of Carolina Recovery, which is UNC Chapel Hill's collegiate recovery program. I'm also a certified peer support specialist and a person in long-term recovery from substance use myself.
Thank you so much for sharing that information, and my apologies, Victoria Menz. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks.
So, Miss Menz, can I call you Miss Menz?
You can call me Vic. I'm not ready for all that.
Okay, Vic, can you provide us with a definition of, or how can individuals determine their definition of the line of addiction? Specifically, how does a person come to determine that they might have a substance concern?
So I think like a strict definition is hard, because I feel like self-definition and self-identification is really critical. But most people that I talk to in recovery describe this sense of like helplessness or hopelessness toward the end of their use. For example, in undergrad, I had plenty of friends who like binge drank or maybe did other substances. So it was really hard for me to realize that I had a problem. But looking back, it's easy for me to recognize how my using was maybe different than theirs. I still used substances in social situations. It's not like I was like using by myself or anything like that. But my motivation was always the substance and not the social interaction itself, if that makes sense. I also couldn't really predetermine how much I was going to use. So there's this like phrase in 12-step programs. It's kind of like a definition, and it says that with substance use disorder, a person loses the ability to both control and enjoy the substance at the same time. So in other words, like if I'm controlling how much I'm using, then I'm not enjoying it. And if I'm enjoying it, then I'm definitely not controlling how much. And I feel like that's the easiest way that I can think to explain what it's like for me, because like a clinical diagnosis, someone with a substance use disorder may include someone who like just binge drinks, not just binge drinks, but you know what I mean. But that doesn't necessarily tease apart the nuance between binge drinking or dependence and someone with a substance use disorder, as I understand it. So I feel like anyone that feels like their substance use is interfering with their life, I feel like it's just like vital to access confidential services or support just to tease that apart in a safe space. Yeah.
I think you explained that very well. I think as college students, we may not know the definition or how to recognize when there might be a concern. So it's definitely a way to open a conversation and asking students, what is what do you think the definition of an addiction is or a substance problem? So I think to allow people to individualize their line is an important part of understanding recovery and addiction amongst one another.
Yeah, because I think it's important, especially young people, to just think about like how the role that they want substances to play in their life, and then like really examining whether their behavior or use is like actually reflecting that, or if it's like maybe getting out of hand a little bit. Because problem use, if you will, quote unquote, I define as any time that substance use is like making problems in your life. You know what I mean? So that could be like, oh, I had a couple drinks too many, I don't feel well today. Or it could be like bigger problems. But it's just like people's threshold, I feel like, is different.
And I also think that it's also a good way in understanding everybody else and who might be going through recovery and reduce the stigma around addiction and issues, especially in different communities where substance use is different. The type of substance use, like in some communities, alcohol is bigger, or marijuana use is bigger than any forms of like pill substances. So it's a good way to, in identifying it yourself and understanding that identifying yourself may be different from identifying from someone else's. So it puts a more perspective in everybody's vocab. Yeah.
Yeah.
Our
And I feel
next
like it's
question.
also just, oh, sorry.
You go ahead. Sorry.
I was just gonna say, I feel like it's important for people to like reevaluate, like evaluate and reevaluate where they are, because it can change over time too. Like, for some people, like doing dry January or like sober October is just like, oh, I'm just gonna like do a little reset, I'm just gonna like take a break, make sure that like I'm not relying too much on this for like social interactions or coping or whatever. Um, yeah, so I think just like checking back in with the self.
Yeah. The next question is, what might lead a college student to overuse alcohol or substances?
Yeah. So obviously anyone can overuse, but some of the risk factors for overuse that we see the most are mental health or emotional health concerns, using substances to cope, social norms or peer pressure, like this is what I'm supposed to be doing in college, or this is what this group of people is doing that like I want to be a part of, therefore I should do that too. Um, Having a lower tolerance or a higher tolerance than other people can lead to overuse. Assuming, and we get this a lot, that people know the standard drink size. Like whenever we send out a survey and it's like, oh, I only had 2 beers last night, but they were like bigger than a standard 12-ounce can, and it was like an IPA instead of a light beer. All of those things interact. So it could be closer to 4 drinks as opposed to 2. I think lack of awareness or education about what substances can do to dopamine levels or like holistic wellness, or how they can interfere like with working out or that sort of thing. Like a lot of people don't realize that a hangover is actually a mini withdrawal from alcohol. Whenever I tell students that, they're like, what? It just isn't, I don't know. We don't really think about it like that normally. And I guess it's also important to recognize, though, that some people who use and by consequence overuse do it to have fun or to like celebrate or to let off steam or whatever. It's not just because of like those reasons. It's just important to like check in about that again and like make sure that there's some balance or harmony in there with like the rest of our holistic wellness, if that makes sense.
I really like that perspective and that experience because I know like a lot of times as college students, when we are very out and social, we're not really aware or examining how much we're partaking of substances. I mean, of course, like, I don't partake in substances. However, just the fact of just acknowledging or knowing that there is a boundary and that you have to be very comfortable with it, and then you have to stand on it, even if somebody's tolerance level might be higher than yours. So
Mhm.
it's like you have to have like that comfortability to say, okay, this is how much I drink, this is how much I engage, and I know when to pull back. And I do have that, that responsibility and that choice in doing that as well. So I think that's really cool. So yeah, I like it. So moving on to the next question. So can you share some experiences or consequences that some might have with an addiction in college?
Yeah. Some of the primary ones, we'll go with those first, or definitely academic struggles is a big one that we see, like decreased performance on an exam or something like that, missing classes, um, or difficulty concentrating, because sometimes even a couple of days after someone uses, they don't realize that that's their dopamine and other neurochemicals. I'm not a neuroscientist. I don't know what they are. Um, those levels are also impacted a few days later. So it's not just like while I'm using, it's not just the next day. It can like linger a few days. Socially, they might face like isolation or conflict, some like strained relationships with family or friends, um, or engagement in like riskier behaviors than they would normally do. Um, I guess also emotional and mental health challenges like anxiety, depression, guilt, shame, and justice involvement or university sanctions is a big one for college students. And then minor or major injuries like a mysterious bruise or I broke my hand, and then overdose also.
Thank you. I think some of those are really important focus, especially because stuff like mental health, depression, and anxiety, it's so easily seen in college students. So having the responsibility to be able to check in on yourself and check in on like your alcohol use, your substance use, and your mental health, your depression levels is important so that you can recognize what's causing these things. Is it alcohol or is it something else? So that's
Yeah.
important.
Or is it both? Because I feel like a lot of cases it's both and one perpetuates the other. It's just kind of like which one came first, but they just, I don't know, make the other one exponentially worse. Um, I feel like a lot of times in higher education, sometimes we don't like to talk about the potential for overdose or death around substance use because we don't want to use scare tactics. Because a lot of us went through DARE or whatever growing up. But part of it is like just being real about it because it is life and death. While I do have like a dark sense of humor being a person in recovery, I feel like a lot of people in recovery have a dark sense of humor. Um, we can like talk about the lighter stuff and like, oh, it might impact my situations with like family or my significant other or grades. Some people do lose their lives, and that's important to talk about too.
Um, Next question is, what is some advice that you can provide for students looking to begin a recovery journey or someone who wants to better their wellness behavior?
One of the first steps, I think, is just acknowledging the issue and trying to like put some awareness to that there are other people on campuses across the country as well as like in the community that want to help, and aren't going to be like judgmental about it. I feel like that's such a big fear, um, and that there are other people from all walks of life because it affects everyone, struggling with the same things. I know for me, I like thought that I was like so alone and that no one could truly understand what I was going through. And I had so much shame built up around that. Um, And so just trying to like break through that shame to like realize that there are people that want to help. This is a little cliche, but that like seeking help is a true sign of strength overall. Feel like it's easier to say that than it is to feel that in the moment when someone like needs help, but it is true. Being like humble enough to ask for help. And then if they are coming with any shame, just that other people can help carry the weight of that shame while you heal. You know, like there are other people who have been through similar things who have probably done worse things than they did like while using or whatever, and that they're there to like help them get through it, I guess. Trying to see if there was anything else. I put like a few notes about this, but and in the early days of recovery for a lot of people, it's about like the little wins. It's not like setting my expectations too high. So I know it's very tempting to be like, oh, I've cut back on substances or I've stopped using substances. Now, tomorrow I'm going to wake up at 8 and I'm going to go to the gym and then I'm going to like make myself breakfast and like plan this whole thing because it feels like we lost time while using substances or something. But starting off small to give ourselves like little wins, because I'm not going to wake up tomorrow and be a new person. Like I'm not going to wake up tomorrow and be a person that wants to wake up and go to the gym every day. But I can make sure I get 8 hours of sleep for like the first week or something. Go to bed at the same time. Then the next week, maybe like I'm going to drink this many ounces of water. Like just like start small with like attainable little wins and celebrate the little ones too.
I really appreciate like that whole aspect of it, especially with small wins, because a lot of times we don't put a lot of weight on consistency. And because the consistent, like even though it may be very small, consistency is still very important. So it's almost like you're working towards like that consistency and just that repetition of doing it, and then later on down the road you really see your progress. But just in the moment you're not really focused on the longevity or preservation. You're just really working in and honing in on that consistency of like you were saying, okay, maintaining getting those 8 hours of sleep, or maintaining how much you drink. So it's like stuff like between stuff like moderation and consistency really kind of it gives people or individuals a guideline or a guide on how to even navigate their recovery, which I think is very important. And as well as I was thinking a lot of like vulnerability, especially when you have like that community, there is a level of vulnerability and everybody is very delicate in that situation. And so I do appreciate that there is a group or there is a recovery program that knows how to handle that vulnerability on that stage that you're in. And so that way you won't feel as if that you're just stuck in that space, but you can move forward.
Yeah, that's one of the best parts about collegiate recovery or just like recovery spaces in general. Because as soon as like I meet someone in recovery from substance use, we already kind of understand like the darkest part, if you will, of like each other without really having to talk about it. So then like talking about anything else is fine. You know, we don't have to talk about like how isolating and like hopeless and whatever that space can be whenever you don't know what to do or like don't know how to ask for help. And so it makes talking about everything else a lot easier. I feel like after that like instant connection, kind of like I don't have to explain myself, if that makes sense. um so yeah.
Oh, well, sorry, it's back to me. Okay. So the next question is, so what tactics have you provided your CRC students with to help them cope with stress?
Yeah, so in groups we do a lot on like mindfulness, and like just general stress management techniques. some people really like Insight Timer app or Calm app with guided meditations or like breathing exercises. I'm a big fan of square breathing, just like where you breathe in for 4, hold for 4, breathe out for 4, hold for 4. That's like an easy one that I can do anywhere. I think one of the most important ones is building a support network or like strengthening support network of like people who are really on board with the person's like wellness journey, you know, who are like really trying to like lift them up and like understand like the changes they're trying to make or that they have to make because of their health. Like they want to see them succeed in that way, and having people to call. That's the thing that I stress a lot with the students, is like making sure that they like have each other's number. If like you're going to a party and are nervous about like there being alcohol or substances there, have someone that knows that you're going to that party that can check in with you halfway through. Like just some like practical things, and also things that people don't really think about. Like I know that a lot of students come in and they're very stressed about, what do I do if someone asks if I want to drink at a party, but like I'm not drinking? And I'm like, they don't care if you're drinking or not. You just say, I'm not drinking tonight, or oh, I have a health concern, or I'm a person in recovery. Like there are all of these different phrases, ways that I can get around it. Whether I want to disclose my status as being a person in recovery or not is like up to me, but helping them decide what they feel comfortable saying, and then just practice saying it, because it's only a big deal to me whenever I say it. Like a person who doesn't struggle with substance use isn't going to care whether I'm drinking that night or not. You know what I mean? So those are just some of the practical skills. But then we also talk about doing physical exercise, or I say this word a lot because we used to say in our office anyways, in the student wellness office, that it's about balance, but I think it's more so about harmony, because balance implies some level of consistency across all aspects of my life, which is never going to happen. But if everything's kind of ebbing and flowing, and I'm putting attention to each aspect of my wellness, whether that's like my mental and emotional health, whether that's my physical health, whether that's school or work or whatever, that I like put focus on one of them, but then maybe the next week or the next day, I'm like focused on one of the other ones, if that makes sense. So really trying to navigate blending those different parts of our lives together and making sure that they're all getting attention, even though like one might get more attention during a certain time period than another one. And then creative stuff. A lot of students like that too. Like I have a few students who are really big into writing poetry, doing art, craft projects. Like even if people aren't that artsy, like just like doodling or putting on some music and doodling, or just listening to music actually. Yeah, those are the ones that come to mind right now.
Those are some really great tactics, especially because majority of them are stuff that anybody could use. Anybody who may be going through some, high stress times, especially with school midterms and finals, using those tactics like listening to music, or just finding somebody to talk it out with, even if it's that person is a piece of paper and a pencil. Those are good ways. And even allies, friends are allies. If you're going to do something, you can always reach out to a friend and just be like, hey, I don't need you to say much. I just need to vent. And that's what I do often in a lot of my friend groups. Just sometimes it's just like, I just need to talk this out but I don't need you to say much kind of thing. So it's great. Our next question is, what features of your CRC have students found most interesting and useful for your college recovery community?
So for collegiate recovery programs in general, I think it's just the sense of belonging and shared understanding and like mutual support, especially on a college campus where in the recovery field, we talk about campuses or higher education places as like recovery hostile environments a little bit, just because the culture can trend toward using substances, especially during different parts of the school year. So giving students a safe space to meet with this like invisible identity, to support each other in that way is a really beautiful thing to see. Some of the specific ones for our program. So I really like the fact that Carolina Recovery is open to community members as well. Like we've had some students come from community college, some come from other local universities. We've had some just like working professionals who are around the same age as the people in the collegiate recovery program and like met at an outside recovery meeting and then decided to start coming. So it just kind of grew up to be a community of a blended community kind of in that way. Also that it's like grad and professional school students as well as undergrad. It doesn't matter. They all just kind of hang out together. We've done a few really powerful workshops on like coping strategies. And then we've done a few like social events that the students were really proud of. A couple of years ago, they did a mocktail event, which was really fun. So seeing them come up with the different mocktail recipes and then making the mocktails for people on campus was really cute. And the past 2 years, we've inaugurated doing a substance-free spring break trip. So the first year we went to the beach. Last year this past spring, we went to the mountains. And the students really enjoy that because it's typically paid for by the university or the recovery community. And it just gives them an opportunity to kind of like get away and bond a little bit more. Yeah, I'd say that those are some of the biggest ones that come to mind. Oh, but we also do things like on big drinking or using holidays like Halloween, for example, or like the Super Bowl. We have a Halloween party for students to go to. So like alternate programming kind of, or alternate events, or a Super Bowl watch party where everyone makes their favorite like Super Bowl food. And then it doesn't matter if you're watching the commercials or the game or both or halftime, they can all like come together and do that too. So yeah, those are a few other of the more fun socially ones.
I really like a lot of these events because they're very social and they're very sociable, and it gives your students a chance to just bond with each other, not only as students, but as people in recovery if they're interested in that. And then it also gives them like a space to just distress from being a student, because I know being a student can be a lot. And so when you have like these events, they are very fun and they're very creative. It gives them gives them a little moment of peace before they go back into being a student of full time, whether that's full time or part time. But just in general, just the fact that they have a space for that and they have an opportunity to just talk with one another and connect in person if they haven't seen each other in person, or just meet new people that may have come into the program. Those are like really good events for spaces and stuff like that. So I like those. I really appreciate that. Really cool. So, what would you say to a student who is struggling and considering assessing their wellness behavior and joining a CRC program?
Well, overall, just come on. We'd be happy to have you. But I think well, it's situational, but overall that there's no harm in like coming and just checking it out. Like no one's gonna hold the person like to coming every week or try to, I don't know, micromanage them or anything like that. Like just come listen to some of the people's experiences. And at the very least, like if you don't relate to anything that's happening, that's okay. And maybe you can be an ally or like something like that. But just emphasizing that there's no shame and that the reason that collegiate recovery programs have popped up all over the country is because there's a real need there. And especially with the mental health crisis as it is post COVID and all of that, like other things are exacerbating substance use. And so getting together, getting young people together to talk about substance use and to be so open and vulnerable, and really just be able to share about those struggles so intimately is a really beautiful thing, because having like conversations or just being able to share about it in that type of setting is a really useful tool, because some people or a lot of people don't really ever consider their substance use. So I think even pausing to consider, am I having trouble with substances? Am I not? Is a big first step that a lot of people never do. And I always, always, always emphasize that it's confidential. Like we're not reporting names to big U university. Like we keep those very much protected. We report numbers, that sort of thing, to get funding so that we can continue to provide services. But it's a non-punitive, non-binding group, and you'll meet really, really, really awesome people who really care about other students' well-being, I guess, or each other.
Thank you for sharing. Yeah, a lot of that is really important, especially for students who are questioning if they want to, reach out to somebody and, just going out to try it to see what you can learn from it may be another first step in just trying to encourage somebody to recognize their wellness behaviors. That's really important. Can you describe the level of awareness about collegiate recovery programs among college students?
College students in general, I mean, it's definitely higher than it was, but it has a long way to go too. Collegiate or pro, whoa, collegiate recovery programs that have been around for a while or are big components of certain universities. There's a lot of awareness there, but I think in general, I think it's an under like realized, I guess, resource. And yeah, so there's a lot of work to be done there. But we do get a lot of students who, whenever they do find out about it, they're like, oh, I didn't know that we had this. This is so cool that you all do this. Like, I want to learn more, or I want to learn how to be an ally of this, that sort of thing. So there is interest in it. I think it's just building up the field and like young professionals to keep the field going and that sort of thing. Part of it's just time too. Like it's a newer thing, like in the past like 15 years or so. So yeah, because it's also tricky because some of the best marketing that people could use is their own story, but that's also like exploiting someone's story. So it's a catch-22 of like, how do we bring people in? You know what I mean? I don't know if that makes sense.
No, that makes tons of sense. I think it is especially like when you're dealing with collegiate recovery, you do walk a very fine line between confidentiality and exploitation. You gotta really be well, I won't say noticeable, but really focused and really understand the difference between those two, especially when you want to promote the program or try to gain more students in or get them interested. And so like you said, the best stories are personal testimonies. They really are. But like you still want to maintain that individual's confidentiality. And I think another thing is when the individual is telling the story from their own mouth, it makes it's so much better. So you really don't have to really worry about that confidentiality because they're telling it themselves. And then on top of that, you get to see like other college students just become interested because, their peer that they've known for so long, whether they've told them about it or not, they're aware of it. And now they are actually like, it's can be in the back of their brain as a resource, not only just for them, but as a resource for somebody else if they need it. And so I think that's also very important as well. But collegiate recovery can walk a very fine line when it comes to promoting. And I'm also happy that y'all got your awareness up. Like I'm really happy about that. Like that's very important. It is important for people to know their resources, especially as a student and as an individual. So I like that.
Yeah,
And
we try to
so
use stuff like the more like sober curious movement that's going on, and like the fact that a few bars opened with like that don't serve alcohol, serve like NA beverages and that sort of thing. Try to use those as like a way for awareness too, and that there are multiple reasons why people don't use substances. Not everyone who doesn't use substances is a person in recovery. There's like people who do it for like religious reasons, health reasons, just because they don't like it. um I don't relate to that, but they do exist. um and yeah, I think that I kind of lost my train of thought. Yeah, but that's why I've like put a lot of thought into it. And since I am in this field, like I put a lot of thought into the fact that I do share my story publicly or don't mind sharing mine. And that's not for everyone, and that's okay too. I think it just slowly eroding away at the stigma that still persists is what's important.
definitely, absolutely. Is there anything you would like to share with our audience that are present?
Hmm. I guess that recovery is like not something that just happens and then it's done. It's like a lifestyle almost, for lack of better phrasing. And some people's recovery journeys includes like returning to use, or some people's recovery journeys includes like, oh, I don't use this substance anymore, but I still use this substance. So not everyone's is abstinence. And some people's is, and that's totally fine too. It's um just important to have like empathy for people. Um, it's important to educate ourselves to like be better allies for people in recovery or who are struggling with substance use. Um, and just the importance of evaluating our like coping mechanisms from time to time, because like even now, like, yeah, I don't use substances anymore. I haven't for quite some time now, but occasionally Amazon gets me. And so like seeing if I'm using that as a coping mechanism, and like, is there something that I could put in there instead? I think there's a lot to be learned from recovery communities about that, and about the intention that people in recovery have to put to every single day to like not using that substance, or to waking up and like continuing their recovery journey. It takes a lot of energy and self-care and self-love to do that, that I think that all people, whether they struggle with substances or not, could benefit from.
Absolutely, definitely. I definitely want to add on to that and just say also endurance is such a key thing, not just for those that are in recovery, but just, people in general. It always is going to take some enduring despite hardships. And so it is very refreshing to see that endurance doesn't have to be in like certain situations. Endurance can be honed and can be a skill that is developed while in recovery. And so it can only get stronger as, you go and in your journey, whatever preference, you have, whether if it's at this abstinence, I don't know if I'm saying that right,
Yeah.
or moderation. And so just having the endurance to actually get up and deal with the things of life or just deal with the things that life has, for the day, just having that endurance and or having that preservation is really like that is very refreshing as well.
Yeah. Ditto that.
Thank you for joining us today so much. And thank you to all of our audience for tuning in today. Please follow us on all of our social media platforms. Follow us on Instagram at NCCU_collegiate recovery, at NCCU_counseling center, and on Facebook. Also, be on the lookout for our next monthly live stream and all of our upcoming events this fall semester. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Bye-bye.
Bye.